You started out, your father was a stockbroker. Did you ever consider going into banking?
I knew more what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be a lawyer, and I didn't want to be a doctor.
You chose to go work for Sandy Weil.
It was a hell of a run, and then he fired me.
You had a lot of jobs. I think you were offered the CEO of Home Depot.
I look at business like I wear the damn jersey. I'm not a hired gun.
Do you think the country is better off for having Dodd-Frank?
The system is completely recovered. Part of that's Dodd-Frank.
You would never consider running for office, would you?
Would you fix your tie, please?
Well, people wouldn't recognize me if my tie was fixed, but okay. Just leave it this way. All right. I don't consider myself a journalist, and nobody else would consider myself a journalist. I began to take on the life of being an interviewer, even though I have a day job of running a private equity firm. How do you define leadership? What is it that makes somebody tick? Jamie, let's talk about your background a moment. You started out, your father was a stockbroker, and you started out with some background in this area, but did you ever consider going into banking? Was that always what you wanted to do when you went to Harvard Business School?
No, I knew more what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be a lawyer, and I didn't want to be a doctor, and I want to be part of building something. And obviously I grew up around stockbrokers and Wall Street and stuff like that. My dad, who passed away recently, gave me, you should all try this one day, get an annual report, rip out the part that has the price in it, analyze it, and say what you pay for the stock, and you'll be immediately humbled. Immediately. Do it a couple of times. And so I was always in the financial world, but to me, just building something, and so I went to business school and stuff. I didn't have to go to the financial world, but I was fascinated. Everything you read in the paper matters. They're global. You get involved in so many policy issues. So it was just a fun place to build, but I would have had just as much fun building something else. To tell you the truth.
But normally, if somebody's a Baker Scholar at Harvard Business School, they can pick almost any job they want. You could have gone to Goldman Sachs, which is a great firm. You chose to go work for Sandy Weil. Why did you do that?
Sandy, he had a small brokerage firm. He sold to American Express at the time. And I found he was kind of down to earth. He had offered me to go to Shearson, their investment bank. I said no, because I had offers from Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and Lehman. I said, I'd learn a lot more of these other places than at Shearson. They eventually called me up, kind of liked me. I was a Baker Scholar, which is important to him. And I said, why don't you just come here and be my assistant? You'll learn a lot. I don't know what's going to happen. And so American Express, he lasted there about 3 more years. But you did learn a lot.
So when he left, he was
when he left, I left with him. I was offered a bunch of jobs to stay and stuff like that, but he said, we're going to find something, build something great. And so we took over this little company called Commercial Credit up in Baltimore here. One of my babies was born in Sinai Hospital, and I moved down here, and we took this little company. It had a consumer finance thing like 7 other little companies, including like a leasing company in Israel, a small international bank that made loans which all went bankrupt called Less Developed Country Loans, a property casualty company, a small life insurance company, and that company is the same company that became Citi. And over those 12 years, we bought, so these names you'll recognize, Primerica, Smith Barney, Shearson, Solomon Brothers, Aetna Property Casualty, Travelers Life, Travelers Property Casualty, and it was a conglomerate. We did a good job running them. We did a good job for shareholders, and merged it with Citi. And so it was a hell of a run, and then he fired me.
What?
And
so what?
When he did that, a year later, I called him up and said, I called him. He didn't call me, just so you know. I said, Sandy, it's time to break bread. And we met at the Four Seasons restaurant, and I wanted to do it privately. He said, no, we'll meet at the Four Seasons restaurant. It was on the front page of the FT, Diamond Weil have lunch, with Civil War in Chechnya. I'm thinking, this is like, anyway, he was a little nervous, and I said, say, we're not going to spend any time in the past. All I want to say is you did the wrong thing for the company. I made a lot of mistakes too, and here's some of the mistakes I made. After I gave him the mistakes I made, he said, thank you for sharing that with me. We had a very nice lunch. It's now quite clear he did the wrong thing for the company, and life goes on.
So you were in a small office, I recall, at the Seagram's building. So you rented a small office there.
After I got fired, you mean?
Right, after you were fired, you had a small office there. I came to see you.
I was fired. I mean, this shows you how stupid corporate America gets when you have, the company had been set up that we had co-chairman and co-CEO John Reed and Sandy Weil. I was going to be the president, and run the global corporate investment bank and other jobs. Because of turmoil among management, deals are very tough. We had tri-heads of the global corporate bank, co-heads of asset management, co-heads of consumer, and all the staff units, risk, finance, and technology, would report to me. Instead, all the staff units reported jointly to Sandy and John. When they did that, I said to them, you guys are crazy. This will destroy the company. The second you do this, people are going to be building trenches and stockpiling ammunition. And by the time you two guys figure it out, a lot of good people have left the company, not realizing I'd be the first casualty, by the way. But they were so, and they kept on saying, well, it works for me, it works for me. And I kept on saying, it doesn't matter if it works for you. It matters if it works for the clients and the employees. It works for me. And so when you hear CEOs say it works for me, you should question their intelligence a little bit about, because it's not the way you should look at business. It's what works for the client, ultimately.
So when you were fired and you were looking for something to do, you had a lot of jobs. I think you were offered the CEO of Home Depot or things like that.
I was offered Home Depot and a couple of big international investment banks, not to run the parent company, run the investment bank. Hank Greenberg, who ran AIG, said, why don't you come over here? And all I could think to myself is, to go from Sandy Weill to Hank Greenberg? I mean, you'd have to have your head checked. A bunch of private equity folks. Right. Jeff Bezos called me up, and he was looking for a president. I love the guy, and we've been friends ever since. I was thinking I would never have to wear a suit again. I'm going to get one of those houseboats in Seattle, and I loved what he did. It just was beyond. I spent my whole life in financial services, so I tell you it's a little bit like playing tennis your whole life, and then going to play golf. So I love the guys at Home Depot. I went down to have dinner with Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank and Ken Langone, and I said to him, I have to confess to you guys, until you called me up, I had never been in a Home Depot. Right. The only reason I went is because the guy who worked for me said, Jamie, you got to go to one before you go to that dinner. And they didn't care. They said, we want you, the person. We're not interested in what you know. We're looking for the heart, the mind, the spirit. We're not interested in what you know about merchants and stuff like that. So a couple of the other internet companies, a lot of them are on money. Oh, you make $1 billion type of thing. And so I banked one. I figured this was my chance. How many major financial companies are there? 30? How many are going to change their CEO in a 3 or 4 or 5 year period? 4 or 5? How many of those are going to go outside? 1? And of course, it's probably going to be a troubled one. So I said, this is my commercial credit. It'll be what we make it. And I put a lot of my money into it, not because I thought the stock was cheap, because I thought that, you know what, I'm the cat. I look at business like I wear the damn jersey. I'm not a hired gun. Okay, I'm going to bleed for the company and give it everything I got and hand it off to someone else. So I don't like people who work at a company that act like, they talk about like it's a third party. It's not a third party to me. This is what I do.
So when you went to Bank One, though, did you ever expect you'd move back to New York, or you thought you were going to Chicago and that was your career there?
I did. I had no idea. I love Chicago, by the way. I love Chicago. It's a great city, and I really didn't know. There's a cartoon of me sitting at an airport, and the person saying to me, Mr. Diamond, there are no scheduled flights to New York. And in Chicago, when I go to Chicago, they didn't believe I was going to move. Are you moving here? Are your kids going to school here? I said, yes, I'm here. I'm really here. I'm staying here. And I used to tell them in Chicago that if I stay my whole life and die in Chicago and they ship my ashes back to New York, they would say, we told you. I didn't know. I thought, I remember the banking industry was consolidating. It's still kind of consolidating. So I knew that if I did a good job, I'd probably be part of that. But I didn't know whether I'd be an acquirer, building up a bigger regional bank, or be an acquirer. But remember, that's not up to me. It's also up to a board of directors. So to me, the thing is make the company as good as you can, and it actually creates all the opportunities you have.
Would you say right now the U.S. economy is in reasonable shape?
America has the best hand ever dealt of any country on this planet today, ever.
What would you advise to get the economy growing at a better clip?
So there are serious issues the country has, and they're not Republican or Democrat. They're not left or right. They're the issues that we kind of talk about, we know about. So immigration, I won't spend a lot of time on. Schumer McCain already had a fabulous bill which should be passed. Inner city school education is a disgrace. We should be ringing an alarm bell. Over 50% of the kids in inner city schools do not graduate, and even those who do are not necessarily qualified to have a job. And schools and those who create jobs should work together to make sure that that certificate, whether it's high school, vocational, or community college, or college, ends up in a job. Not just that we have more tax reform. We are driving American capital and American businesses overseas every day. This inversion problem is also making it advantageous, believe it or not, for foreign companies to buy American companies, for foreign companies to invest here, more than for American companies to buy American companies, for American companies to invest here. So it's a little more complicated. Now, I also agree that you're not going to have corporate tax reform without individual. And I would propose something like a greatly expanded earned income tax credit. You've been reading a lot about infrastructure. The Democrats are right. We need more infrastructure. Like you're talking about $100 to $150 billion more a year, which is almost a drop in the bucket. And I'm talking about transportation, tunnels, bridges, roads, airports. The Republicans are right when they're afraid of just raising taxes to do more government spending. You know, and they just hear that great sucking sound of Washington, bridges to nowhere, more crony capitalism. This is a perfect place to get the people in the room, ask the Republicans, how can we do this in a way that you would approve it, that you know we're building bridges we actually need. I believe the president took care of all those things, and like I said, they're not Democrat or Republican, the economy would be booming. I don't believe this argument that secular stagnation is permanent, savings gluts. We'd be booming. We're not booming because of all of the issues that we've self-created, and that have slowed down growth, and it's time for them to do something to make it fix. And by the way, wages growth will fix wage inequality. And studies show that cutting corporate taxes will help wage equality, make it better. So we should be very thoughtful about policy, that we get it right, and not just over-politicize. We really damage ourselves when we do that.
So you come to Washington from time to time to meet regulators and legislators, and what kind of experience is that for you?
First of all, I think it's important that business get involved in Washington. So I'm not a person who says you never go there. Policy is set here. There are a lot of people here who really do care about making it a better country. And if you don't get involved, that means you'll be set by other people, so it's necessary. Obviously, the regulatory environment for banks has been, not just for us, I mean, I travel the United States of America, and when I go to people, groups like this in any city, I mean, I get an earful about regulations completely unrelated to banks. So I do think there's a serious issue about, diminishing a little bit the regulatory burden that's being put in the economy. And, but I come down, I do the best I can. It's my job, to deal with regulators and politicians and policy issues. I also think when you come down as a business person, the interests of the country should be put before the interests of your industry or your company. And so businesses are constantly coming down and asking for, that one little thing that helps them. Like I hear these horror stories. Just do what's right for the damn country. Your business is going to be fine. And in fact, your business will be better off if the country's strong. So business has to be a little careful to be. It's too self-serving, and that does not appeal to the American public. It doesn't help politicians get things done, and that's what I'm saying. An earned income tax credit, taxing your carried interest a little bit. Those would be good things for America. We should do that and help them at the lower end with education, income assistance, all those things we need, but have corporate tax reform.
Well, that's the interview's over.
You can afford it, David, okay?
Thank you. On the economy, you get data from all over the world that JP Morgan gets. Would you say right now the U.S. economy is in reasonable shape?
Yeah, when we look at the economy, I always look, where are the potholes? So we did see potholes in 07 and 08 and leverage and mortgage. There are no real potholes there, okay? But I give the other way around. America has the best hand ever dealt of any country on this planet today, ever. Okay, and Americans don't fully appreciate what I'm about to say. We have peaceful, wonderful neighbors in Canada and Mexico. We've got the biggest military barriers ever built called the Atlantic and the Pacific. We have all the food, water, and energy we will ever need. Okay, we have the best military on the planet, and we will for as long as we have the best economy. And if you're a liberal, listen closely to me in that one. Okay, because the Chinese would love to have our economy. We have the best universities on the planet. They're great ones elsewhere, but these are the best. We still educate, most of the kids who start businesses around the world. We have a rule of law, which is exceptional. If you don't believe me, and we talk about Britain, Brazil, Russia, India, Venezuela, Argentina, China, India, believe me, it's not quite there. We have a magnificent work ethic. We have innovation from the core of our bones. You can ask anyone in this room, what can you do to be more productive? Ask your assistants, factory floors, we do it. It's not just the Steve Jobs, it's this broad depth. We're the widest and deepest financial markets the world's ever seen. Okay, and I just made a list of these things, and maybe I missed something. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And we have it today. Yes, we have problems. But when I hear people down, if you travel around the world, get in an airplane, travel around the world, and go to all these other countries, and tell me what you think. Go to Europe. You want to talk about bad, tough regulations and bad politics? So we have it all, and we just need to fix we've been shooting ourselves in the foot, in my opinion. We've been doing a pretty good job shooting ourselves in the foot.
You would never consider running for office, would you?
I would love to be president of the United States of America, okay? And until Donald Trump got to where he was, I used to say you'll never have a rich businessman who's never been in politics be president. And so I clearly was wrong about that. It's just too hard, I think that most people, you have to be senator, governor, run for years, be part of a party. It's why Michael Bloomberg, who would be eminently qualified, didn't do it. It's why a lot of you probably haven't done it. I also think, by the way, this collaboration, what you hear today is this constant, get the experts out of the room. We've heard that before. We need policy, thoughtful people. We need analytics. We need it done right. We need it done together. 145 million people work in America. 125 million work for private enterprise. Okay, the government can't fix all these things itself. And when they act like government's the only solution, I remind them of the Post Office, Veteran Affairs, the Department of Motor Vehicles. Matter of fact, the only thing they do really well is the United States military. And so collaboration works. And if you go around the country, it works in all these cities, all these states. It's here. For some reason, we just get bogged down, and it's just maybe just too complicated for mankind.
What's the greatest pleasure of doing this, running a bank?
I'm not an artist. I'm not a tennis player. I'm not a musician. I'm not a politician. This is my contribution.
So do you think the country's better off for having Dodd-Frank now or not?
Yeah, look, the banking system is in enormous strain. Okay, J.P. Morgan we do the stress test. I'm very much in favor of stress tests. J.P. Morgan has $500 billion of capital today. That capital is enough to bear the stress losses of all 31 SIFI banks, all of them. The whole banking system in America has recovered. Part of that's Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank in reality is thousands of things. I don't know anyone who agreed with anything in Dodd-Frank. Barney Frank and I agreed that some of the things we put in there after the fact should have been put in. So I don't agree with all of it, but it is what it is.
What about the
Unfortunately, because Dodd-Frank, Volcker was one of them, was added kind of an after-the-fact thing, which is, in my opinion, completely unnecessary. But it is what it is. I have to deal with it, and that's the law of the land, and it's being interpreted. The other thing Dodd-Frank does, it really gives, it's not a legislation that says X. It basically says, make the system better, do what you have to do it. So the regulators have a huge amount of authority to interpret some of these rules, and so the system's better. Dodd-Frank is partially responsible, but Dodd-Frank, was passed 100% Democrats, 0% Republicans, and none of us can possibly say you can't make things a little bit better. So one day, rational people should sit down and say, what parts work, what parts didn't work, which parts should be changed. I'm not in favor of throwing it out and starting from ground zero, and a lot of good work was done, and there were a lot of flaws that needed to be fixed.
You were quoted before the Brexit vote as saying that maybe you would have to move people out of London. Have any new thoughts?
Yeah, so I think what happened with Brexit is kind of what we expected. We never said it was going to be a disaster. Brexit is a vote for the unknown that we thought would reduce the GDP of the UK. It's going to. So forget little data that comes out. It's pretty much going to with foreign direct investment, people opening factories, construction. It's not a disaster. It's good. We think 0.5% to 1%. That'll reduce the GDP of Europe a little bit. Not a disaster, 0.3%. That's one thing we know. And the second is now we have this mountain of uncertainty. And it isn't going to go away because you're going to be reading for the next year or 2 years about all the complexity. And we don't know the outcome. So I usually look at the best case, worst case, which I won't go through here. The best case is it looks a lot like today, and it's fine. I give it only 10%. They're not going to get away with that because the Eurozone is kind of angry, and they want to keep the Eurozone together. And they're saying you're not going to have free free access to our markets without free movement of people. Well, that's exactly why people in Britain voted against it, for Brexit. And well, I wasn't for it. There was logic for it. Their logic was, why tether yourself to sclerotic Europe? Where Brussels is passing rules that affect British citizens, and that was true. So maybe the Eurozone will look at this as an occasion to say, let's fix the problems for everybody, all 27 nations, not just for Britain, and then Britain negotiates some favorable deal. What worries me the most about Brexit is that it caused the Eurozone itself to unravel. You have elections in France and Germany, so you don't even know who the leadership is. You have the same kind of populism surfacing over there than you have over here. It's tough. And if you see the Eurozone unravel, that has potential catastrophic issues associated with it. And it may be just a big recession. It could be worse than that. You know what that continent's been through for hundreds of years. And to me, keeping the union together would be a better outcome. If they don't, we'll deal with that too. But a better outcome is they have a stronger union, not a weaker union.
What about the banks in Europe or in China? Are you worried about the banks there?
The banks in Europe are way behind America. And I'm saying it with sympathy to them. Just like when I'm talking about our peaceful neighbors in the Atlantic Pacific, I remind people China doesn't have food, water, energy. Its neighbors in North Korea, Philippines, Japan, Pakistan, India, Russia, Indonesia. Tough part of the world, folks. And that changes people's mindset when it comes to managing a country, et cetera. And so Europe is behind us. They still haven't fixed their capital, their profitability. It's much more important to the financial system in Europe than it is here. It's 80% of the financial system there. Here it's like 20 or 30%. But I think if I was running the European government, if you were a dictator, I would lay off them at this point. Let them do their jobs. I mean, pounding them 8 years later in my opinion, is causing Europe to grow a lot slower than it would otherwise grow. Because these banks are unwinding constantly loans and issues and credit. So I think I don't want to see them hurt anymore. I would like to see them get strong. And in a healthy economy, if they need to add capital, liquidity, do it then. In China, the 4 big banks, by several of them, earn twice as much as we do now. So I tell American politicians, I'm not saying it lightly, that is my competition too. Some of them earn $40 billion a year. They may very well have problems in their loan books, but they're ambitious. ICBC Bank is now in 60 countries. If you go back 30 or 40 years ago, it was in 1. Chinese companies are going abroad, which I think is very smart. I think the Chinese are quite smart dealing with their situation. Their banks are banking abroad. They want their banks to be winners. They want to have the JP Morgan Chase of the next one. And I don't want them to have it. I think we should have it. And they could buy us one day. So, we got to be very careful when we talk about American business, what we want for American business and how important it is for the success of America. And not just us, but I put, a lot of these companies in the same boat, GE and Caterpillar, and we got to compete. And we got to compete with some very large, tough competitors globally.
You've been now running a bank for CEO, Bank One and JP Morgan for about 16 years. So what's the greatest pleasure of doing this, running a bank?
This is my contribution to making it a better world. Is running a good JP Morgan Chase. I tell people if I don't do a good job at JP Morgan Chase, I hurt the opportunities for our people. I hurt the opportunities for the 2,000 hamlets we do business in. We can't be philanthropic. We can't help people grow. And if I do a good job, we can do all those things. I'm not an artist. I'm not a tennis player. I'm not a musician. I'm not a politician. This is my contribution.
Jamie, I assume your shareholders would be happy for you to stay forever, but do you have any plans about how long you might stay in this position?
I love what I do, and I still have the energy to do it. It does take a lot of energy.
Your health is good?
Like that. My health is good, thank you. And so I'm, as long as the board's happy with me, I always say 5 years. I'll be 65, and I do think there's a time when the right person is ready that I should leave. Maybe the board asks me to be chairman for a year or 2 or something like that, and I'll have an afterlife. Like you, I'm never going to stop working. I'll go on a board. I'll teach. I'll maybe do something to help the government somewhere. I mean, I'll be fully engaged in business and stuff like that. But and I'll also try to make it a better country. And my wife is deeply involved in philanthropic to help. She does inner city schools in the South Bronx. Try to get those kids jobs, and she's doing a great job at that. So I'll probably help her a little bit, things like that.